what is leadership? Before I define leadership, let me try to talk about what leadership is not. So number one, leadership is not dictatorship. Dictatorship is not leadership because leadership involves inspiring and motivating others to achieve a common goal through collaboration, empathy, and inclusiveness. On the other hand, dictatorship involves an individual exerting complete control over a group of people without considering their inputs, their ideas, or their feelings. A dictator might use fear, coercion, or intimidation just to maintain power, and this, in my opinion, is not necessarily leadership. Number two, leadership is not activism. While activism might be very impactful, it's not necessarily leadership because activism involves, advocating for a particular cause, social justice through public demonstrations or through public speaking. While this might bring attention to very important issues in the society, it's not necessarily a prerequisite for effective leadership. In my country, there was a very great activist that evolved some time ago. He spoke against some of the bad things that those in government were doing at the time. I think it was the Labour chairman. I can't really remember. I don't have all of the details right now. And he really put the government in his days under serious pressure. However, over time, people believed in him and eventually elected him into power. Guess what? When he got into power, he even performed worse, or would I say he performed poorly than some of the government officials that he was criticizing while he was an activist. So, someone being an activist doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to make good or effective leaders. Number three, charisma is not necessarily leadership. While charisma can be helpful in leadership, it's not necessarily a prerequisite for effective leadership. Many successful leaders are actually introverted and reserved people. Their personalities don't necessarily mean that because they are reserved or introverted, they cannot be good leaders. While there are some people who have very high charisma, but they're just merely noisemakers. Next up, intelligence is not leadership. While intelligence is undoubtedly, beneficial, it does not guarantee effective leadership. Leaders must learn how to understand really complex situations. So, intelligence is not enough. Emotional intelligence also might be a better trait that you're looking out for in leaders. I'm going to be talking about this later in this course. Dominance is not leadership, so similar to what we talked about, being dominant and aggressive might help in some situation, but it's not necessarily an attribute of effective leadership. True leaders seek to empower others and create a sense of collaboration and cooperation. We're going to be talking about this later in this course and how it works. Next up, title is not leadership. True leaders are not necessarily defined by their job title or their position within an organization. There are many people with titles who can pass for just being mere placeholders. I know this is a very harsh saying, but it is true. And this means that anyone can be a leader because leadership traits can be learned over time, regardless of your position within an organization. Leadership involves, working closely with people and moving people towards a common goal. So you don't necessarily have to be the CEO to become a leader. Within your small circle, within your family, amongst your siblings, or wherever you find yourself, you can actually exhibit leadership traits. Next up, leadership is not good intention. You can have the best intention in the world for your team, for your organization, for your country, but if you lack the necessary skill set and the necessary tools that will enable you perform effectively as a leader, then your good intentions won't just be enough. I mean, think about this. Let's say you find yourself in the jungle and you are faced with a wild animal. If you don't have the tools that would enable you defeat that wild animal, then you are helpless. You have the best intention to get yourself to safety, but if you don't have the tools you need, or if you can't run, then you are in big trouble. So good intentions is not just enough. So what then is leadership? Leadership is a very complex concept that can be defined in various ways. I'm sure if you've read different books or listened to different podcasts, you are going to hear different definitions of leadership. I've tried to compress some of this definition that I think is suited for my personal use. So I'm going to give you my definition of leadership. Leadership is the ability to influence, motivate, and guide yourself, a group of people, or a team towards a common goal or vision. There's a common misconception that people are born leaders and some people can never be leaders. I don't think this is true. Socrates once said, "True leadership does not depend on a man's birth, but upon his knowledge." So this tells us something. You don't have to necessarily be born to be a leader. You can actually pick up leadership skills along the way. So this training is part of your journey to picking up the necessary tools that's going to make you an effective leader. So just stay with me. Thank you.